All right, good afternoon. Everyone having a good summit? All right, so my name is Jim Kagi. I manage the DoD technical team for Amazon Web Services. I've been here for about 4 years, and we're going to kind of use this session to do a couple things. Number one, for those that are looking for a little bit of a DoD update and what AWS is doing in DoD, we'll go through some of our most recent developments, some of the things we've been working on. And then we're also really happy to have one of our great consulting partners, Enlighten IT, here with us. It's going to talk about some real amazing mission support workloads, excuse me, that they have running and operating inside of AWS. They've been just doing some amazing work throughout the DoD community that probably not most people in this room are just not aware of, and I think it'd be really useful for you to see how we're actually supporting real-world missions and some of the big data analytics work that our customers are doing using AWS GovCloud and other AWS services right now. So let's just hop right into it. All right, so just getting a quick kind of accreditations update. We always have to start here with DoD, of course, right? If you don't have accreditation, you can't really get anywhere. So as you guys all know, excuse me, we achieved a FedRAMP High in the AWS GovCloud region, and then shortly after, and then that really has been very helpful because if you haven't noticed, in the DoD Cloud SRG, it was recently updated in March, and the majority of FedRAMP High security controls are now aligned with DoD Impact Level 4. So that's really helpful because Amazon Web Services in the GovCloud region, for the most part, we strive to take the majority of those services through FedRAMP as soon as we can, and as soon as we get good feedback from our customers letting us know these are services we want to utilize. So right now, as of today, we've got roughly 19 services in AWS GovCloud that are DoD Impact Level 4 approved. We have more that are in the hopper. We love to hear customer feedback on what services you want to see, not only in GovCloud, but also go through DoD accreditation. The majority of those 19 services that we went and got accredited was due directly to customer feedback. I see some folks in the room here that was part of that feedback cycle, so this is really great. We love getting more services accredited so that our partners like Enlighten IT and others can do some great things in the GovCloud environment. For DoD Impact Level 5, we expect to have that PATO very shortly. And again, it'll be for GovCloud region and a number of the services in that region. Of course, if you heard the announcement yesterday, we have GovCloud East that will be opening up early next year. We expect that GovCloud East will also have Impact Level 4 and Impact Level 5 ATOs very soon after we open it up. Connectivity to DoD. I mean, there's always, of course, if you read the DoD Cloud SRG, you have a lot of questions about cloud access point, connectivity, and how that all works. We've been connected to, we've had physical peering connections into DoD information networks on the East Coast and West Coast since 2014. So we've been NIPRNet DREN connected for a number of years now. There are pathways to get connected to the 2 existing cloud access points, and then of course we have some customers that have done alternatives to the cloud access point. And we're happy to talk about those alternatives with customers on a one-to-one basis. So if you have any questions about cloud access point, connectivity, right after I step off the stage, let's trade contact information. We can dive into that pretty deeply. So kind of the latest DoD cloud policy that came out in the last few months is the DoD Secure Cloud Computing Architecture. So we're actually pretty big fans of this concept from an architectural perspective. It was released in March. It's kind of it had a legacy. It was a revisement of the Cloud Access Point FRD, which came out in draft format a few years ago. And what we really like about it is that it provides the implementation flexibility. It provides you the freedom to architect and manage, your virtual data center management stacks and security stacks as a shared services enclave, so that the idea is that many applications can kind of share the same services. So instead of having to deploy Active Directory and NDP for every single server or every single application, you can kind of do that once and then scale out that environment along with the dozens or hundreds of applications that may be sharing that enclave. And it also provides some great flexibility in that, for some of these services, you might get them from different services providers. For example, DISA is planning on providing VDSS and VDMS as a service to DoD customers, but you might be in an organization where you might say, we already have our virtual data center management stack. We've either already deployed that in Amazon, or we have some of these services in our existing data centers. So it really doesn't make sense for us to use a VDMS provided by someone else. We're just going to use our own services. And the good thing about the FRD is that it provides that flexibility to utilize these services from whoever can provide them, whether it's yourself or if you want to get them from someone else. Let's dive a little bit deeper into what these things are, what these definitions are, and then I'm going to kind of show you how we've implemented SCCA compliant environments inside of AWS. So you got your virtual data center security stack, and that's generally just the idea of an enclave that provides network and application security, such as like an application-aware firewall. You might put an IPS in there, maybe a web access firewall. Then you get your VDMS, and that's a place where you're going to put shared services like Active Directory or LDAP or DNS. You might put some patch repositories there, or NTP. Excuse me. If you happen to be a cybersecurity service provider, in the DoD, there's 23 CSSPs. You might want to host an HPSS EPO service or an ACAS security center or some other type of shared security service enclave. And that's kind of the VDMS is kind of a good place to put those type of services. Now, the Trusted Cloud Credentials Manager, we were very happy to kind of see the DoD addressing privileged user access in their policy here. If you've been AWS customers for a very long time, you know that we have identity and access management. And identity and access management provides very fine-grained permissions and controls for users, groups, and roles inside of Amazon. What TCCM is kind of a recognition by DoD that excuse me, in a cloud environment, because all your networks are software defined, traditionally in DoD, security has been very, very focused on network and perimeter security. Network and perimeter security has kind of been the primary DoD cybersecurity focus for the last 15, 20 years. Now, once you start moving into a cloud environment where your networks are software defined, where your perimeter access is software defined, generally, in the cloud environment, you need to really look at how you're handling authentication and authorization because it's a software-defined network where those changes to whether or not your VPCs are connected to the internet or connected to NIPRNet or connected to some other private network, you have to recognize that those API calls to AWS to attach or create an internet gateway, that's all controlled through proper authentication and authorization. And so the whole idea behind TCCM is that authorizing officials in the DoD will have a policy established for controlling privileged user access so that the folks that do have access to create internet gateways or controlling network routing into a VPC, you want to make sure that those folks are establishing those network connections in an approved manner. So for example, if you have an AWS account and you've given your developers or system admins access to an Amazon account, that's great. You want to give them the flexibility to deploy EC2 servers and to develop code and deploy and test out new things. But you might not necessarily want to give those developers access to creating internet gateways or connecting VPCs back up to the internet or to some other network where they haven't gotten prior approval. So TCCM is, again, the whole idea in the policy around governance and privileged user access and having proper separation of duties and really thinking about how you're going to manage access to your cloud environment. That's all good stuff. And of course, you have the cloud access point, which is DoD's mechanism for providing boundary security between, say, AWS and DISN, or a Defense Information Systems Network. So the way I like to talk about CAP with folks that are kind of new to this concept is CAP is really two things. You got to think of the CAP as two things. Number one, it's a traditional network access point, right? Access points are kind of very well understood. It's, Amazon has a router, the DoD has a router. We establish border gateway protocol sessions between our routers. We trade routes and we route traffic between each other. So that's very well understood. I mean, we've been doing private peering, public peering between various networks commercially, of course, for many, many years. And, we've been doing private peering between DISN since 2014. But really the other part of what a CAP is that security stack that's protecting the DoD network from anything that might be originating from the virtual private cloud in AWS that could be harmful to the wider DoD network. So kind of diving into this a little bit more, right? When you look at that DoD SCCA FRD, and you look at what a VDS is, right? It's that whole idea of managing a shared services security enclave where you have your WAF, your IPS, you might have a data repository for network flow logs or for packet capture data. When you get down to the VDMS, it's a great place for ACAS Security Center. It's a great place for endpoint protections, patching services, log management. And again, the idea is that these are leveraged services, right? So instead of building up these stacks for each individual application, you want to get economies of scale out of these environments, right? So you could have a VDSS that's actually being leveraged not just by one application, but by dozens. If you happen to be in the Army or the Air Force or the Navy, the idea is that you're either going to purchase a VDSS environment as a managed service from DISA, or you're going to operate and manage your own, or within your enterprise organization, and that you're going to have all of your mission owner system apps connect up to that VDSS stack. And I'll kind of show you what this architecture looks like. So if you're going to move a 3-tier web app, let's just use a quick example of moving a 3-tier web app from a DoD data center into AWS. So traditionally in a DoD data center, you've got your firewall, you've got your web servers, you got a load balancer, traditional 3-tier web application. You'll see web apps designed and architected like this throughout DoD. If you're going to move this into AWS, what are you going to do first? First you're going to decide if it's an impact level 2 or impact level 4 or 5 environment, and that's going to help you decide what Amazon region you want to use. If it's impact level 2, you could use any of our commercial US regions. If it's impact level 4 or higher, you're probably going to select GovCloud. But the first thing you do is you select your region, you create your VPC. If you're going to connect the VPC up to NIPRNet, you're going to probably create that VPC using NIPRNet IP address space. You can get that from the DoD Network Information Center. There's a very well-defined process to do that. All right, and then just like anything else in Amazon, right, if you want to have high availability, then you probably want to deploy in a multi-availability zone architecture. So you've got availability zone A, and say, let's pretend this is GovCloud. You start deploying your web servers, your app servers, your database server. And then you might want to have an auto-scaling group, and you might scale it out. Now, again, also in DoD, you might end up having a COOP data center, right? And so we get a lot of questions about, well, how do you handle disaster recovery, and how do you handle COOP in AWS? Well, again, the cool thing about AWS is we have multiple availability zones, which equates to multiple data centers inside of a single AWS region. And so effectively, your COOP environment actually becomes the entire AWS region. Instead of just deploying your data and your app in a single AZ, use multiple availability zones. And in that way, you can move both your production and COOP environments actually into a single AWS region. And run your application with high availability using load balancers, DNS round robin, auto-scaling groups. And of course, your database tier, you're going to do synchronous replication. Most database engines have some type of data synchronization for synchronous replication. There's also a dev test model for all of this, or there's actually an alternative architecture that I didn't bother putting up in the slide deck, but we've actually in DoD had some use cases where Amazon's the COOP environment. So the production application is actually in the DoD data center, but then you're COOPing to Amazon. And then we've had some scenarios where the Amazon was the COOP, but then it became the production, and then the DoD data center became the COOP. We've had both of those scenarios, but in general, in most use cases in DoD, due to acquisition and other various factors, you start to migrate to AWS, you get your workload in there, you COOP within the region. All right, I skipped over this. We talked about auto scaling. You got your security groups. You good? You can see it over there. All right. You got your security groups, and is that going to come back up? Oops. No. Sorry about that. Let me build my slide. Maybe it will resync. Well, sorry for those on that side of the room.
This is that lift and shift model right here for moving your app to the cloud.
That's why you have
Everybody
two
move
AZs.
to this side of the room.
AZA just went down. All right, great, awesome. All right, so this level set on some terminology, right? Again, if you're new to Amazon, if this is your first time at a public sector summit, you may have heard of some of these concepts and terms, but in DoD, we like to show this slide when we kind of do our first intro briefs to folks in DoD. An availability zone equals a data center. Traditionally in DoD, within the DoD data center, you kind of separate out enclaves or application systems by VLAN. In AWS, we talk more at layer 3, so you have subnets, EC2 instances of VM, et cetera, load balancer. Right, I think most people here have a little bit of AWS level setting over the last 2 days, so you know what those things are. So a VPC, right, your virtual private network within AWS, you can assign NIPRNet IP addresses to it. Now, I always like to call out security groups. One of the cool features of Amazon that you won't find in most data centers or you won't find really anywhere else is this whole idea that every server, every instance that you launch, every EC2 instance you launch in AWS has to have a security group attached to it. You can't just you can't just run a server and launch that in AWS without having a security group. And the security group is really great. It's deny all by default, and so you have to explicitly allow permissions for certain ports and protocols or actually all ports and protocols for network traffic to route to your instance. So, if you're going to be deploying a web server EC2 instance, you need to open up port 443 in TCP. If you're going to be deploying, Active Directory inside of AWS, then you need to open up port, like 139 and DNS. But the good thing is that when you open up these ports and protocols, you don't have to open it up to the entire internet. You can control what servers can talk to what servers, right? So you could have a security group for your web tier, and the web tier servers are able to communicate with the app tier, but then they're not able to communicate with your database tier. So what's really, really cool about this is that even within a single virtual private cloud, you can create this really, really strong isolation model where not every server is allowed to communicate with each other. You're only allowed to communicate with servers that make sense for your particular workload. And then we have a whole bunch of storage services, right, in Amazon. So I think, of course, you have Amazon S3 and the DoD. This is a really, really great place to store log files and log data. If you've turned on AWS CloudTrail, all your CloudTrail logs will be stored in simple storage service. We've got Elastic Block Storage, which is your network-attached storage. And then we got the Elastic File System, which we haven't brought to GovCloud yet, but we're looking to get that in there. It is available in US East and West, and people really, really love the EFS service because it allows you to create a network file share between multiple servers. And then we have the relational database service, and I call this one out specifically because I want everyone to be aware that it is Impact Level 4 certified now. So if you want Amazon to provide you a database service for Oracle or PostgreSQL or MySQL, where we take care of the patching and the high availability and the durability of the data, the RDS service is now available at Impact Level 4. And then for log management and automation services, this is really important because number one, CloudWatch provides a place to store application logs. It provides a very, very cheap way of processing your security audit logs. So we have a number of DoD customers that have actually used the CloudWatch log service now available in GovCloud to stream all of their VPC flow logs and all of their privileged user logs, which come from CloudTrail, and they set alarms on those logs so that if someone creates a new security group entry that opens up your SSH port up to the internet, they can get alerted on that automatically. And more importantly, just in the last week or two in GovCloud, we released AWS config rules. And config rules is really, really cool, and Lambda as well. So what's really cool about config rules and Lambda is that you can now do automatic remediation. So if someone opens up a security group rule or does something, whether it's maliciously or accidentally with your environment that goes against your governance policy or goes against DoD security policies, you can now very, very easily revert back to the last known configuration or the configuration that's been approved by your authorizing official. So CloudTrail and config are really what enables all of this. CloudTrail is collecting all the logs of all the Amazon API actions. And if you think back to what I just said a few minutes ago, remember every networking action in AWS is software defined. That means now you have a record of every time someone changes a route table, every time someone changes an ACL, every time someone connects a VPC up to the internet or up to NIPRNet or up to DREN, there's a near real-time audit record of any of those actions occurring. And so a lot of times in DoD we get questions about, well, how do we know that our VPC is not, if it's an Impact Level 4 environment, how do we know that our VPC hasn't been connected to the internet and creates this kind of backdoor from the internet to NIPRNet? We get asked that question a lot. And obviously you have a number of security controls, what we call preventive security controls you can put in place to make sure that doesn't happen. You can lock down your identity and access management. You can require multi-factor authentication on the folks that do have access to create internet gateways. But then you also have your backstop, this is kind of what we call a detective security control. A detective security control is CloudTrail, which shows you whether or not someone has taken an action in the account to connect that VPC up to the internet through something like an internet gateway. If that action occurs using a combination of AWS config and config rules and other monitoring tools, you can actually automatically remediate that and prevent that action from creating any harm or damage to both the DISN or to that virtual private cloud. And then, of course, you have AWS CloudFormation, which is, it's one of these services that we call infrastructure as code. It allows you to create repeatable, recreate environments in a repeatable manner. We have a lot of awesome DoD use cases for this, for dev test environments. So for those that are come from the DoD community, you might be familiar with like Zone C, Zone B, dev test type of environments. It's actually, and DoD Cloud SRG was recently updated to kind of better define how you deploy dev test environments in AWS. So what's really, really awesome now is that you can use CloudFormation templates to kind of templatize a very standard dev test environment that you always have available to you, and you might have already done some baseline type accreditation on that CloudFormation template. And so that anytime any developer in your organization needs a development environment to go test out some new code or try out some new big data analytics process, they can very, very quickly take this CloudFormation template and relaunch an environment. And I'm really excited for John to get up here in a few minutes to talk about how they've used CloudFormation to automatically deploy a big data platform environment. John's going to get into a little bit more depth in that in a few minutes. So when you got a combination of CloudTrail, CloudWatch, and VPC flow logs, you've got all the log management analysis and alerting that you might need to provide your security operations center, or in the DoD, you might have a cybersecurity service provider that needs these log information. You've got your config management visibility. You've got your backup through Amazon S3 and Glacier. Of course, Glacier provides code storage and archival storage for less than a penny per gigabyte. That's really, really valuable in the DoD world, especially in cyber analytics, where some of the most useful data science that's occurring in DoD and in the intelligence community right now is in analyzing not just 5 terabytes of data or 10 terabytes of data, but like massive amounts of data in the petabytes arena. And of course, in order to store petabytes of data and then analyze that, you need to have a place to store that data very, very cheaply. We've done some cost analysis with some DoD programs that show that if you were to offload the majority of the data that you want to store and save over a 10-year period, it could equate in the long run to billions of dollars of savings for the DoD. Identity and access management, of course, is kind of the key to all of this, right? Because without strong privileged user access control, you would not be able to, without having a strong policy and governance around this, then it's impossible to do any of these things in an accredited manner. So again, going back to this kind of a, example here, where does SCCA fit into this, and what are we doing to help make it easier for our DoD customers to deploy an SCCA environment? So again, you go back to this kind of traditional DoD deployment. We talked a lot about the 3-tier web app, right? You got those kind of boxes on the right there and left. You got your 3-tier web app, but then one of the things in most DoD data center, you have all these services that are being provided for you. How do you get these services in the cloud? If your application is already in a DoD data center, then you probably have data center provided AD, you have data center provided HPSS and ACAS and log management. How do you get these services inside of AWS? These services are still critical to most applications, and a lot of applications you have to completely rewrite them or re-architect them if you didn't have these as services available. So you got to get these services somewhere, and that's kind of where that's where we have to address here with the SCCA, right? Is that anything that you might have a web application, it could be a SharePoint portal, could be a Drupal web application, it could be some type of big data analytics workload. But if you need to be secure and compliant, then you still need to have a WAF, you still have to have ACAS and HPSS or some type of equivalent solutions to those. You got to have DNS, you got to have patching services, you got to have these services provided by some entity. And that's really where SCCA comes into play. So if SCCA, the Secure Cloud Computing Architecture, whether it's these services are being provided by DISA or the Air Force or Army or Navy or some other DoD agency, if they provide these shared services enclaves, they can architect something like this. And I know there's a lot up here, so I'll kind of walk through what you're looking at here. So on the right, where you see Mission Owner Virtual Private Cloud, you have a VPC that's set up specifically for that mission owner app, that SharePoint portal, that web application, that big data analytics workload, whatever it is, that resides in that VPC. And then on the left, you've got your virtual data center security stack. So your virtual data center security stack might be managed by one of those entities I just talked about. You could be getting that from DISA, you could be getting that from your service component entity. And then you got your VDMS. The idea is that you bring these shared services inside of the cloud. Now you could run these in a hybrid mode where some of these services are still exist and live in a DoD data center. As long as you have network connectivity through Amazon Direct Connect or an IPsec VPN tunnel, of course you can run these services in a hybrid mode. But most people are finding that they want to get these services inside of AWS as soon as possible because obviously the more of these services you keep in the data center, the more risk there is to your application from an availability standpoint. One of our chief technologists in Amazon always likes to say that the more routers that are looking at your packet means the less likely your packet is going to make it from point A to point B, right? And it's one of those laws of the internet, right? So you want to have the most direct path, the best path, the lowest latency path from one endpoint to another. And so the quicker you can get shared services inside of the cloud, the more available your application is going to be, the more highly performant your application is going to be. And then, so you got that VDSS and that VDMS virtual private cloud there, and those are all cooked up and connected to each other through either VPC peering or through IPsec VPN tunnels. There's a lot of different transit VPC architectures that we've employed to make these all work. And then what you see on the left is Amazon Direct Connect. Amazon Direct Connect is our ability of creating private peering connections between AWS and some third-party network. And of course, like I said earlier, we have circuits that have been provided by DISA to connect the DoD networks into Amazon Direct Connect. And then of course, DISA deploys a cloud access point. The Navy's payroll organization also has a cloud access point. And we have a number of other customers that have deployed their own equivalent security boundary protections. DREN is in the process of deploying their own security boundary protections. So what we've kind of done here, and here's one more. So what we kind of done here, just to give you a little preview, is working with some really great partners like Palo Alto Networks and Steel Cloud and Trend Micro, a number of different partners. Everything you're seeing here in this diagram, we've automated the deployment of this entire environment as a series of CloudFormation templates. And if you've ever been to aws.amazon/quick start, right now today on our website we have quick starts for NIST High and for NIST compliance. Very shortly, we're going to release a new quick start for DoD SCCA compliance. And so there's a couple of really cool things about this. Number one, you'll get CloudFormation templates that can deploy a VDMS stack, a VDSS stack, and a sample mission owner application. But more importantly, we're also going to give you a spreadsheet that shows you how all the DoD secure cloud computing architecture requirements can be enabled and fulfilled using AWS native security features or partner security features and tools. So one of the big challenges, of course, in DoD is getting a system ATO. And so what we're trying to do is enable the folks that authorize and the security controls assessors, the information assurance professionals, are trying to make their jobs a little bit easier, trying to speed up that ATO process. And one of the things we're doing is we're pre-documenting, we're taking all the NIST 853 security controls and DoD RMF, taking all those security controls, and we're providing language recommendations for how you've implemented that control in AWS by deploying these CloudFormation templates. The other cool thing we're doing is we're showing you all the controls you inherit from AWS, right? There's about 20 plus security controls that just by being an AWS customer, you inherit from us. Things like physical security, environmental controls. Because Amazon is FedRAMP approved and DoD Cloud SRG approved, you can inherit these controls from us. So that's really, really awesome. So yeah, we're really excited to get those templates out on our public website. Like I said, they'll be publicly available. You can download them. And the cool thing is that, again, the whole point of the SCCA is that the implementation is flexible. So we're going to give you a kind of a proof of concept environment for this, but you can take out any one of these modules that you don't want to use. So if you're going to get your VDSS services from some other enterprise organization in the DoD and you don't need a VDSS, you can take those and rip those out of our CloudFormation templates, and you can just deploy a VDMS. If you just want a VDMS, or if you just want a VDSS and you don't want the VDMS, that's great. And of course, we're going to put in Palo Alto Networks and Trend Micro. We're going to use Steel Cloud in this environment. If you have licenses or another product that you would prefer to use, you could always take those products out and put in your own. It's completely flexible in the way you implement. So we're really excited to get that out there and see how our customers and mission owners can use that to accelerate their ATOs inside of AWS. All right, so just Yeah, a couple things. I know a lot of people are probably in a lot of security sessions here at AWS, and we talked a lot of security inheritance. But I just want to be clear, right? We have this mantra, right, in Amazon that security is job zero, and of course, what that really means from a DoD compliance standpoint is that FedRAMP through third-party audits provides you the assurance that we're doing all of these things that you see right here. So if you are new to DoD compliance, or if you've never kind of gone through this journey of deploying something new in AWS, if you need to see the assurances and the security controls and the third-party audits that have been done to show that Amazon can do these things, that we have number one, physical security, network security, platform security, and we have the people, processes, and tools to enable security, anyone can get access to our, anyone in the federal government, if you're a .mil or .civ, .gov employee of the federal government, can get access to our FedRAMP package where we give you our system security plan, we give our security controls traceability matrix, and how all these controls were implemented on our side of the fence. This is all part of that shared responsibility model where there's some things Amazon does and there's some things that you do. These are kind of all things that are considered, these are things Amazon does under the hood to protect your data and to employ good security hygiene in the environment. And of course, generally, right, you got to keep in mind that security is your job too, because we're going to give you these SCCA templates, we're going to give you recommendations and best practices, we're going to show you how to implement all of these things, but you still have to remember that depending on what Amazon services you are employing, you still need to patch your operating systems in some occasions, right? If you're using relational database service, we'll handle the patching. But if you're using EC2, if you're using Windows or Linux or Red Hat, you're still responsible for patching your services. So I always like to put this out here to remind folks that, this is Amazon. We're going to do a lot for you. We're going to provide best practices. We're going to provide these CloudFormation templates. We're going to give you that baseline environment. But there's still a lot of work there's still some work you have to do on your side. But we'll be right there alongside with you to help you implement all these security control mechanisms. And the way we're going to do that, we've got best practices. So if you haven't been to the AWS Security Center, there's a lot of great stuff there for DoD compliance. If you go to, I forgot to put the link in here, but aws.amazon.com/compliance will give you links to all of our DoD FAQs and paperwork and all of our good stuff there. So I really want to get John up here. So I'm going to skip through some of these things because I think what John's going to talk about is going to be a little more pertinent to what we have in this audience here. And, oh yeah, actually there's one more thing I wanted to show you here. So when we talked about that NIST high quick start, just to kind of give you a visual representation of what we have. When we deploy this quick start, we're going to give you architectural diagrams, we're going to give you a security control matrix, we're going to give you the deployment guide, and we're going to give you CloudFormation templates. And this is all going to be SCCA related. So we're going to use DoD mandated security controls. We're going to take language out of the DoD SCCA, and we're going to show you how you implement that in Amazon. And this is kind of a blow-up of what that security controls matrix looks like. So we show you exactly where in the template we implemented the security control. We show you if that security control was shared. We show you if you inherit from us. And if you look on that lower left-hand side where it says CloudFormation template mapping, we tell you the exact Amazon APIs that we're using to meet a particular security control. All right, so I'm really, really happy to introduce John Eubanks from Enlighten IT. He's going to talk about some of the DoD tactical enterprise big data analytics workloads we have running in DoD today. And this is really, really cool stuff. I mean, this is really, really mission critical operations running inside of AWS GovCloud. So John, great to have you here.
Hey, thanks, Jim. Jim never ceases to amaze me with the breadth of knowledge that guy contains about just a massive amount of different aspects of AWS. So a lot of you probably sitting in the audience today are going, man, where do I start? This is a massive amount of information. Guys like Jim, the solutions architects here at AWS, they're absolutely amazing to work with. There's also the Amazon Partner Network, if you're not familiar with it. You just saw a whole showroom floor full of vendors that work closely with Amazon. So if you're wondering where to start, come seek out one of those Amazon Partner Network vendors and connect with us. We'll help you get through the starting gate and into process. So pretty excited too to see that spreadsheet that you put together there. The automation stuff coming through. One of the things we're going to talk about is the accreditation package that we just did for US Cyber Command for one of their AWS deployments. And I just went through 400 and some security controls, manually typing them all in. I would have loved to have had access to that ahead of time, and I could have reduced a few hours of work or a few days worth of work. There we go. So we'll hop into the big thing. Mission speed cybersecurity. So as you're all familiar, ATOs are critical inside the DoD, IC spaces across the federal government, but they slow down our mission needs and our ability to accomplish our mission while we're waiting for ATO processes to occur. So in partnership with Amazon, what Enlighten's done is we've built a big data platform. Big data platform, rather generic term. What is big data platform? Talking petabyte scale, analytic capabilities, and the software systems to support that. So we've partnered 3.5 years probably with Amazon in taking the Amazon platform and building complementary solutions that ride on top of that inside AWS GovCloud, and we're pushing out to the other regions that are available there too. So just a few high-level bullets here about what we actually did. We put in place a production, development, and a training environment of our platform. We got those deployed in 2 days, thanks to the amazing automation work that Jim was talking about with CloudFormation templates and some internal IRAD projects that we did ahead of time to prep things. We do PCAP processing inside of AWS GovCloud. And so how do we do PCAP processing inside AWS GovCloud? What we do is we send the AWS Snowball out into the mission space. We collect the PCAP. We ship it back, talking about hundreds of terabytes of PCAP coming back on a weekly basis. We put that up into Elastic MapReduce, and we process that PCAP in a secure VPC separated from our big data platform, just so malicious things don't escape while we're in the playback and processing mode. And then we take the metadata associated with that PCAP and we transfer it over into our big data platform for DoD threat intel analytics to run against that data collection. Right now, I think we're up to 300-ish terabytes inside one of our cloud environments in AWS GovCloud, hopefully be about a petabyte by the end of the calendar year. We're already about a petabyte in one of our other GovCloud environments that we have stood up for a different client. And we work with very, very diverse sets of data. It's one of the biggest challenges when you come inside the DoD is we're not talking a local network with 1,000 hosts, 4,000 hosts. We're looking at networks with 40,000 hosts and up from there. And so you see a very wide, diverse set of data types that you have to work with that often don't appear inside traditional corporate networks. We have a team that works just purely focused on understanding those data types, what's inside of them, how we can generate value out of those capabilities, and how we can process them in near real time. So even the PCAP processing side, we're chewing through hundreds of terabytes of PCAP in a single day and generating analytics on that PCAP metadata really instantaneously for the analysts. Traditionally, it might be a month before that PCAP had been processed in an actionable way. We're correlating it at the same time across multiple years worth of data collect in some cases to draw those analytics out of it. So the accreditation side, Big Data Platform is a DISA product. It's government off-the-shelf technology. It's already been accredited for deployment on traditional NIPR and SIPR hardware systems. But up until this mission, it didn't have an ATO for deployment in AWS GovCloud. So what did we do? We took an existing ATO package for the Big Data Platform. We took the FedRAMP package that AWS has, and instead of jumping into Exact or jumping into EMAS, the first thing we did was call up a DAO and sit down with a DAO, get them in front of a whiteboard, and we whiteboarded out how these two ATO packages married up and how they leveraged each other to create an even more secure solution than the traditional hardware deployment that's going on today inside the DAO. And we got that DAO buy-in prior to even moving forward with the accreditation process. Then went through the, for this accreditation process here, the Exacta multi-step process up on the IC side, very similar process in EMAS for those of you that are familiar with that. But we had the ISO DAO level buy-in before we even started building our accreditation packages for this mission. And so, I don't know if it's up here specifically, but we got an ATO in 3 weeks, which is unheard of inside the DoD to get an ATO in 3 weeks. And so mission sort of all over the news. Most people are probably familiar with it. I won't talk about it here. But very active cyber mission going on right now, and thanks to AWS, we're able to do the impossible. There's no way you could have acquired hardware, gotten an ATO, stood up a cybersecurity solution in 3 weeks without a commercial cloud environment ready to be plugged in and go. We'll hold on to questions. We'll take them afterwards. Jim and I will be available one-on-one, seeing a few hands pop up. So if you want to come up afterwards, we can talk one-on-one with you, answer questions about what we're doing here. On the SSP and ConOps point down here, reuse, reutilization of content, extremely important. Many of you sitting in the room, your solution, whatever you're trying to take to the cloud, it's probably been done before or something very similar to it. It's just finding the right touch points, the right people to connect with to help you out in those processes. So if you have a ConOp SSP need, the accreditation package in front of you, don't feel like you got to tackle it on your own. Come through the Amazon Partner Network, through the solutions architects here, let them help you, steer you along, find another partner that's already been through similar hurdles in the past, has already accomplished them. You'll accomplish all your goals a lot faster that way. On the virtual private cloud point that Jim had up earlier, one thing we've done that was a DAO requirement for our accreditation was we had to put each of our environments in a separate virtual private cloud, and then we had to control the communications across them and whitelist access. So thanks to the Amazon security controls that Jim mentioned earlier, that was a day-long process to get that stood up and implemented, and we were up and running in minimal time at all. So that's about it that I had pre-planned, at least from a slide perspective. I do want to hop into the exciting part. What is mission? What are we doing? How are things being accomplished? So the mission, what we're doing, we are taking data collection from inside a few specific DoD networks. We are looking for adversaries that are present in those networks that have not been seen before due to ever-changing TTPs or a long-established history inside that network, dating back before we even started collecting data inside that network.
So John, a quick question I'm sure most people in the audience have is how did encryption come into play to your accreditation? How did you use encryption, both in the snowball and within your environment to make people in the DAO's office and on the government side of the house comfortable with what you're doing?
So very good point there. So one thing, when this mission started, we happened to be perfectly timed with the release of the Snowball Edge. Could not have come out on a better day. To the day we sat down with the DAO to talk about the data transfer out of these mission sites back to Amazon GovCloud. So their requirement was you must do your encryption on disk. We don't have the compute power to encrypt prior to storage. So the only device that we had easy access to was the Snowball Edge, which just so happened to provide that feature. So we're using the Snowball Edge on mission site to transfer data. We encrypt it on disk prior to sending it back. We send it back, and then we found out the hard way. Only AWS can get that data off using the encryption technology. So it's a good thing. We tested out the security controls unintentionally along the way. But
yeah, so one of the things how Snowball works, if you're unfamiliar, in the key management service. So if you're not familiar, I didn't have a slide on this, but Amazon, we have what's called the AWS Key Management Service. And what's great about the Key Management Service is it allows you to generate your own symmetric encryption keys and controlled access to that encryption material using identity and access management, AWS identity and access management. And one of the things that Snowball does is Snowball, when you go in, first of all, if you're not familiar with Snowball, because I didn't believe I had a slide on that either. Snowball is, we have a couple different versions of the Snowball device, but what it is essentially is a 100 terabyte storage medium, weighs about 49 pounds, it's ruggedized, it's built to mil spec, and it has not just 100 terabytes of data storage on it, but it also has compute capacity on it as well. And one of the things that Snowball does is it allows you to use the Amazon Key Management Service to require that all the data stored on the Snowball is encrypted using your own keys. So what Enlighten IT was able to do is they were able to show that the Key Management Service, and of course with our assistance as well, we were able to document how we're using FIPS-approved algorithms, FIPS 140-2 approved algorithms for how we've implemented the encryption on the Snowball. and then they were able to encrypt the data at rest on the Snowball. And of course, when you transfer that data from the Snowball back into Amazon S3, which is our object storage service, that's transferred using TLS 1.2 encryption in flight. And if, for those that are wondering, the key management service, AWS Key Management Service, is going through its final FIPS 140-2 validation testing by independent lab testing. Although we've already taken KMS through the FedRAMP High process, and we've taken through the DoD Impact Level 4 process. So KMS is approved to be used for DoD workloads, and Enlighten IT is able to take advantage of that for the Snowball. Just, John, I think probably one other question that the folks are wondering is, with the big data platform, how does that play into how do people get data, or how people process data? I think some people are thinking, well, the big data platform, so far it sounds like you're just using that to process data that's collected outside of AWS, but probably could be used to collect and analyze data originating from AWS as well, right? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely right. So going back to the log collection and analysis, one of the key components of the big data platform, what it was built to do, is that log analysis. So when we're pulling in those logs, we're looking for alerts already, whether we're partnered with AWS to use their alerting tools. We're doing initial correlation and alerting inside our platform, but we can actually ingest our own logs back into the platform, along with, so going back to what data are we creating inside AWS itself, that PCAP data. When we bring it up, we're processing it, we're using Bro and Wireshark to extract the metadata from it. So we're generating additional data sets inside the cloud. We're growing our data inside the cloud instead of shrinking our data, and we're making more useful analytics out of it from that. And then even correlating it back to what's happening inside our cloud.
And the cool thing too is that the analytics development is obviously a really huge thing inside of DoD right now. There's a lot of awesome data scientists doing some really cool things out there, and of course people want to collaborate. And so we've had a lot of use cases, whether they've been driven by Enlighten IT or others, where data scientists and developers and researchers inside of DoD have generated net new analytics, and then you can very easily share those analytics with others in DoD so that they could run their own instantiation of the big data platform to test those analytics out on their own data.
Yeah, that's a good point. So one of the BDP environments that we stood up was this development environment. That's not for the Enlighten developers. That's for DoD developers as a whole to get into this development environment and build analytics, because one of the things a lot of research institutions, DARPA, MIT Lincoln Labs, the list goes on and on, want is those government data sets. They want to work with them, they want to understand them, they want to build solutions that work against them. So Cyber Command had us stand up an environment to support that. So we have our platform there, we deploy our own analytics on it, we follow an open source model where anybody can see our analytic code that has government approval to see it. And so it's a collaborative development environment where whitelisted, approved users can get in, they can see the data, they can see the analytics that are already built, they can work to enhance the existing analytics or build their own analytics against the data set, or if they have something on the shelf that they want to pilot out, see if it'll work, they can upload it through a governance process and see if their analytics work on the data sets.
And the other cool thing you did, right, is use CloudFormation, right, to deploy to BDP. Can you just talk about how that works and the interfaces you guys created to use CloudFormation? Great.
Yeah, so the IRAD project that I briefly mentioned, Rapid Analytic Deployment and Management Framework, radmif.com, is that interface with the CloudFormation templates. So we saw repeatedly the same DoD customers wanted to deploy very similar cloud environments to support their big data analytic use cases. So we worked with Amazon. We came up with a templated model whereby users can come in, they can request, I think we have 12 different configurations that you can point and click, choose to deploy into AWS GovCloud to meet those specific use cases that they may have.
So that's really, really powerful. Essentially what Enlighten IT has built is a big data analytics platform. It's the same stuff that DISA and others in the cyber community use to power their on-premise analytics. They've essentially automated the deployment of an analytics cluster that can scale out to hundreds and hundreds of nodes. You can get it all up and running in under a day, do some analytics do some testing, or even do some real live production mission work, and then take it all down when you're done using it. So that's a really, really powerful thing that Enlighten has brought to the DoD, and they've made it available to not just DoD customers, but obviously the intelligence community and really the federal government wide. So I think we're about out of time. Like I said, John said, and we're happy to take questions one-on-one off to the side, and we really thank you for coming. And if you have any questions or like to exchange contact information, we'll be hanging out here for the next 10 minutes. Thanks, everyone.